Imagine like a weapon striking at the speed of light.
Oh, wow.
Or a missile that's like so fast, it's basically untouchable.
Yeah.
This isn't like science fiction anymore. These technologies are out there, they're being developed right now, and it's kind of sparking a global race to, be the first, the best, and there are some pretty big consequences that could come from all this.
For sure.
Welcome to Dansplain.
And you've joined us for a deep dive into the world of futuristic weapons technology.
Yeah, and this is based on some really interesting material that you sent to us. Our mission today is to unpack the key advancements, understand, who's leading this charge and what it all means for the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you provided a really comprehensive overview, and we're going to break down the major categories for you. Directed energy weapons, hypersonic weapons, autonomous systems, advanced missile systems, cyber and electronic warfare, and even space-based technologies.
Yeah, so think of this as like your shortcut to grasping what's really happening in this field because it is changing so rapidly.
Right.
Okay, let's start with directed energy weapons. What exactly are they?
So directed energy weapons, or DDWs, use focused energy, like lasers, microwaves, or particle beams, to disable or destroy a target.
Okay.
And the thing that's so fascinating about DDWs is the speed they operate at the speed of light.
Wow.
This near instantaneous engagement. It kind of changes the whole concept of reaction time in warfare.
Right.
And it could even make traditional defenses obsolete.
So speed of light engagement,
Yeah.
that's hard to even wrap your head around.
It is.
Okay, let's focus on lasers for a second. We've all seen them in movies.
Right.
But how close is the reality to what we see in the movies?
Well, I think the reality is getting pretty close to the movies. Lasers work by concentrating light into a super powerful beam and generating heat that can damage a target by literally melting its components.
Wow.
You mentioned the U.S. Navy's Helios system in your materials.
Right.
And that one can actually burn through drones and small boats.
That sounds like a movie. So it's not just like a visual effect. This is really focused energy causing like real damage.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is the precision and the potential for very localized damage.
Wow. Melting drones with a laser. So, beyond just how cool that sounds, are there like real tactical advantages to using a laser like that versus, a traditional projectile?
Yeah, the main advantages are precision and potentially lower collateral damage.
Okay.
Also, you have a potentially limitless magazine as long as you have a power source.
Right.
And it's interesting to note that while the U.S. is pursuing systems like Helios, the UK's Dragonfire laser offers a slightly different approach.
Oh, okay.
It's known for its precision targeting, but also its potential as a lower-cost alternative to traditional munitions.
Okay.
So this adds like an economic dimension to the future of warfare.
Okay, so lasers are about heat. Now let's move on to another form of directed energy, microwaves, and I'm kind of picturing like a super powerful version of what's in my kitchen.
Well, they're not exactly household appliances, but they do use the principle of emitting electromagnetic pulses.
Okay.
High-power microwave weapons generate these intense pulses that can fry electronic systems.
Really?
Yeah, they can disable enemy communications or even the electronics in vehicles without actually causing physical destruction.
Wow. So it's like a digital knockout punch.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Yeah.
The key insight here is the ability to neutralize technology without using kinetic force.
Okay, that's fascinating. And then there were particle beams. It sounds very sci-fi still.
It does, but the underlying science is real.
Okay.
Particle beam weapons accelerate charged particles to incredibly high speeds, like near the speed of light.
Wow.
And when these particles hit a target, they can pierce armor or disrupt electronics like microwaves do.
Okay.
So what's fascinating here is that they can cause both physical damage and electronic disruption from one energy source.
Wow.
But one of the challenges in developing them for the battlefield is, actually generating and maintaining these high energy beams.
Right. I can imagine that's a pretty big challenge. So who are the big players in this directed energy arena?
Well, the United States is definitely a major investor with systems like Helios as a prime example.
Okay.
China's also heavily involved, and Russia has demonstrated some capabilities.
Yeah.
And the United Kingdom, with its Dragonfire system, kind of highlights this collaborative and competitive landscape in DEW development.
So a lot of the usual suspects, it sounds like, okay, let's shift gears now to something that sounds equally cutting-edge hypersonic weapons.
Yes.
We hear that term quite a bit. So what makes them so different and so challenging?
Well, the key difference is Speed, hypersonic weapons travel at Mach 5 or higher, which is 5 times the speed of sound.
Wow.
But it's not just speed in a straight line.
Yeah.
Their maneuverability at these speeds is what makes them so hard for current defense systems to deal with.
Right.
They don't follow predictable trajectories, making them really tough to track and intercept.
I see.
The combination of speed and unpredictability makes the decision-making window for defenders almost non-existent, which gives the attacker a huge strategic advantage.
So we're talking about something that can go incredibly fast and change direction whenever it wants.
Basically, yeah.
That sounds like a nightmare to defend against.
It is.
What are the different types of hypersonic weapons?
There are two main types, hypersonic glide vehicles, or HGVs, and hypersonic cruise missiles, or HCMs.
Okay.
HGVs are launched into the upper atmosphere by a rocket, and then they glide back towards their target at these hypersonic speeds.
Right.
Russia's Avangard system is a good example. It's designed to be super maneuverable and able to evade existing missile shields. So the unpredictable flight path is the main thing here.
Okay, so a glider traveling at Mach 5, that's a pretty wild image.
It is.
And the other type was hypersonic cruise missiles. How do those work?
Right, so HCMs are powered by scramjet engines.
Oh.
Think of it like a regular jet engine that needs to slow down incoming air to burn fuel efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
A scramjet is designed to burn fuel in air that's already moving at supersonic speeds.
Wow.
It's kind of like trying to light a match in a hurricane, but it's engineered with incredible precision.
Right.
This lets HCMs sustain hypersonic flight at lower altitudes, and the U.S. HAWC program is a key effort in developing this type of weapon.
So the main difference is the glider uses momentum after an initial boost, and the cruise missile has its own engine pushing it along at those crazy speeds.
Exactly.
Okay. And who are the leaders in this hypersonic race?
It's really Russia, China, and the United States that are at the forefront of hypersonic weapons development.
Okay.
And your materials mentioned that China's DFZF glider has undergone testing, and Russia has reportedly used its Kinzhal air-launched hypersonic missile in Ukraine.
Right.
So these aren't just concepts anymore. They're actively being developed and used.
Wow. That definitely adds a layer of urgency to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, autonomous systems. And this feels like we're stepping into science fiction territory here. Weapons making their own decisions.
Well, the reality is it's kind of a spectrum.
Okay.
At one end, we have unmanned vehicles like drones that are remotely operated.
Right.
But the cutting edge is moving towards AI-driven platforms that can operate more independently.
Yep.
So it's a progression from remote control to something approaching artificial intelligence making tactical decisions.
I see.
And the main idea behind autonomy is reducing the need for humans in the targeting and engagement process.
Okay, so we're all pretty familiar with unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs like drones, but what's the next step there in terms of autonomy?
So current UAVs like the US MQ-9 Reaper are really powerful for surveillance and strikes, but they still rely on human operators.
Right.
The trend is towards integrating more AI, so these systems could potentially identify targets and even engage them with less and less human intervention.
Right.
And that kind of leads us to lethal autonomous weapons systems, or lawless.
LAWWS. Okay, that sounds pretty serious. What exactly are they and what are the main concerns around them?
LAWWS are systems that can identify, select, and attack targets without a human controlling them directly.
Wow.
This raises some big questions about accountability.
Right.
Like if an autonomous weapon makes a mistake, who's responsible, the programmer, the commander, or the machine itself? These are tough legal and moral questions that the world is trying to figure out.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's the whole idea of swarm technology, like a coordinated attack by a whole bunch of these smaller autonomous systems.
Exactly. Swarm technology involves deploying lots of coordinated drones or other autonomous vehicles.
Okay.
And the idea is that the sheer number can overwhelm enemy defenses.
Right. Huh.
We've heard that China has done some military demonstrations with this capability.
Really?
Yeah, and it shows the potential for this to be a disruptive tactic in future conflicts.
So it's like flooding the zone with all these autonomous weapons, and that sounds incredibly hard to defend against.
It does.
So who's working on this kind of technology?
The United States is a major player, especially through DARPA programs like Gremlins, which is about deploying drone swarms from aircraft.
Wow.
China is investing heavily, as we saw in those demonstrations.
Right.
Israel is also a big developer of drone technology, and several European nations are working on autonomous systems as well.
So everybody's kind of getting in on the action here.
It seems that way.
Okay, let's move on to advanced missile systems. Missiles have been around for a while, so what are the big new developments?
Well, the basic idea of a missile is still the same, a projectile that's propelled towards a target.
Right.
But the advancements are in precision, stealth, and range.
Okay.
It's about hitting a very specific point with minimal chance of being intercepted.
I see.
The focus is on overcoming defenses and getting more accurate at longer distances.
Okay. And precision-guided munitions, we hear that term a lot.
Yeah.
How have they gotten so accurate? Let's call them PGMs for short.
Sure. So PGMs achieve their accuracy through different guidance systems.
Okay.
GPS is a common one, but lasers can also be used to mark targets.
Right.
And more AI is being used to improve targeting and even make course corrections mid-flight.
Wow.
The U.S. Tomahawk cruise missile is a good example of a PGM that's gotten a lot of upgrades to its precision over the years.
So we're talking about being able to hit very specific targets from far away?
Yeah, that level of precision is becoming more and more achievable. And beyond guidance, there are also improvements in propulsion.
Okay.
For example, electromagnetic railguns are a really interesting development in projectile technology.
Railguns, yeah, I've heard about those, but how do they actually work?
So instead of using chemical propellants like regular guns or rockets, railguns use electromagnetic forces to launch a projectile at super high speeds.
Wow.
This could give them a much greater range and speed, and theoretically they could be cheaper than missiles.
Interesting.
The main advantage is achieving these high speeds without traditional explosives.
That's pretty amazing. And what about these smart bullets I've heard of?
Smart bullets take precision to a whole new level.
Okay.
DARPA's Exacto program is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
These bullets can actually steer themselves in midair to hit a moving target.
Wow, so it's like a bullet that can adjust for wind or even the movement of the target.
Exactly.
That's incredible. Which countries are leading the way in developing these advanced missile systems?
The United States is still a leader with programs like Tomahawk and Exacto, but Russia is also very active with missiles, like the Iskander, which is known for being really maneuverable.
Okay.
China is also improving its missile technology rapidly, and even North Korea has been making some progress in this area.
So it seems like a lot of countries are interested in developing these kinds of weapons.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the more digital side of things now. Cyber and electronic warfare systems.
Okay.
This feels like a constantly evolving battlefield that we don't even see most of the time.
That's true. Cyber and electronic warfare targets an enemy's networks, communications, and sensors.
Right.
Not with physical force, but through digital or electromagnetic means.
I see.
The goal is to disrupt, degrade, or completely shut down their ability to function.
Okay, so the battlefield is more like the digital world and the electromagnetic spectrum.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start with cyber weapons. We hear about hacking all the time, but how does that translate to warfare?
Well, in a military context, cyber weapons can range from malware that disrupts things like power grids or financial systems,
Right.
to tools that can infiltrate and sabotage enemy command and control networks.
Okay.
Stuxnet, which was linked to the U.S. and Israel, is a good example.
Right.
It was a sophisticated piece of malware that caused a lot of damage to Iran's nuclear program without using any physical force.
Wow.
This really showed the world how much impact cyber warfare could have.
Right, and then there's electronic jamming, which I guess is like disrupting signals, right?
Exactly. Electronic jamming uses powerful transmitters to emit signals that interfere with or block enemy radar communications and even satellite links.
Okay.
For example, Russia's Krasuka system can reportedly disable AYCS radar and satellite communications over a pretty big area.
Wow.
This essentially blinds and deafens the enemy on the battlefield.
That's pretty powerful. So it's like a battle for control of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah.
Who are the major players in this less visible arena?
The United States has long been considered a leader in cyber and electronic warfare.
Okay.
But China is catching up quickly, and a lot of people are concerned about that. Russia and Israel also have very advanced capabilities in these areas.
So it's a very dynamic and constantly evolving field.
Absolutely. Offense and defense are always adapting to new threats.
Okay, finally, let's talk about space-based weapons.
Right.
This still seems like something out of science fiction,
It does.
but it's becoming more and more real.
It is. Space isn't just for reconnaissance and communication anymore.
Right.
It's becoming a potential battleground.
Wow.
Space-based weapons operate from Earth orbit, and they could target satellites or even things on the ground.
Wow.
So access to and control of space is becoming incredibly important.
Okay, and it seems like the most straightforward type of space weapon is the anti-satellite weapon, or ASAT.
Right.
How do those work?
ASAT weapons are designed to either disable or destroy enemy satellites.
Okay.
And this could be done in a few ways, including using kinetic interceptors, which are basically missiles that physically hit a satellite,
Right.
or directed energy weapons like lasers. Back in 2007, China used a missile to destroy one of their own old satellites.
Right.
And that really showed the world that this was possible.
Yeah.
It also raised some concerns about creating space debris.
I can imagine that was a big mess.
It was.
Okay, what about space-based lasers? Are we talking about those like beams firing down to Earth from space like we see in the movies?
Well, the idea is pretty dramatic, but right now, space-based lasers as actual weapons are still mostly theoretical.
Okay.
But it is possible that powerful lasers in orbit could target and disable missiles or even aircraft.
Right.
The U.S. Space Force is looking into these systems, especially for missile defense.
So which countries have the ability to fight in space right now?
The United States, China, and Russia are the main ones with proven anti-satellite capabilities.
Okay.
India also has ASAT technology.
I see.
And the U.S. focus on space-based missile defense shows that they're serious about protecting their space assets and potentially using space to project power.
This has been an incredible overview of some pretty mind-blowing technology.
It is a lot to take in.
To wrap things up, can we summarize who the leaders are in each of these areas and what the big strategic implications are?
Sure. So the United States is strong in a lot of areas, like directed energy weapons like the Helio system,
Right.
hypersonic technology like the HIWC program, and autonomous systems, which they're developing through DARPA.
Okay.
China is catching up quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and they're excelling in hypersonic weapons like the DF-17.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really good at using AI in military technology, and they have strong space capabilities.
Okay.
Russia is focused on hypersonic weapons like the Avangard and Kinzhal,
Right.
and they have sophisticated electronic warfare systems like the Krasuka.
Okay.
European nations like the UK with their Dragonfire laser,
Mm-hmm.
France with the Neuron UAV, and Germany are all making big contributions in specific areas.
So it's a pretty diverse landscape with a lot of players.
It is.
And what are the overall strategic implications of all these advancements?
Well, it seems like the future of warfare is going to be about more precise and faster engagements, with cyber operations becoming even more important.
Okay.
Autonomous systems could reduce the need for large numbers of troops in some situations.
Right.
But the speed of these conflicts and the potential for things to escalate quickly could also increase.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
If one country gets really good at these technologies, it could really change the balance of power in the world.
Exactly. And that could lead to new arms races and more instability in different regions.
Right, so the implications for global security are huge.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through this fascinating and sometimes unsettling landscape of future weapons.
You're welcome. It's something we should all be paying attention to.
Absolutely. And if you found this deep dive into the future of warfare fascinating, make sure to like and subscribe to Dansplain for more.
Yes.
You can also visit www.dansplain.xyz for the latest episodes, articles, partner products, and a chance to dive even deeper into these topics. We'll catch you next time for another look beneath the surface. Bye!